Welcome to this video, and this may end up being more than one video. The basic idea behind this is, since we have web classes that are simply using software to develop certain kinds of styles on web sheets, and other classes are using the actual programming language, I decided to go ahead and make one generic video about this topic, which typically divides students, and sometimes they initially have some difficulty with the concepts. The main concept behind this is about something called cascaded style sheets. And I've got a document here in front of you. Hopefully you're able to read this. We are currently using, even if you are in Dreamweaver or Expression Web, behind the scenes you are using a language that is built for all web pages called Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML. Basically, it describes the structure of a web page, whether you've got lists or tables or paragraphs or forms to be filled. Basically, the structure itself is done, and oftentimes the style, meaning the color of the text, the background of the page, the color of the form, the emphasis on words such as bold and italics and such, are all built into the language. The trend now is to take this style, the color, the typography that goes with it, and separate those from the actual structure itself. And that's done with a concept that's been done in recent years, probably 2 or 3 years in heavy duty, called Cascaded Style Sheets, or CSS for short. Now, some of this terminology may not make sense, and it definitely will not for many of you unless you actually apply this to some exercises. So you need to do that. Watching is like watching, as I've said before, someone change a flat tire. Until you've actually done it, we can watch and read books, but we really have to get hands-on to apply this. As far as cascade style and sheets basically go, the word cascade basically is deciding when a particular rule takes place, because the style can be defined very internally in the document with a specific tag, such as a paragraph or a bold feature. And I'm going to assume you've done some of these basic early chapters when I mention this, and it decides which one of the cascade rules takes place. The definition basically is wherever the style is latest or closest to the element. This will make sense in a very few minutes because I will give examples. The style is a very detailed description of how to present a web page content, and I gave the example on this sheet you're seeing on the screen now. Strong is the new HTML code for something being bold, and the word strong and its tag, end tag, will make it bold. But if I wanted to add an additional part of that, strong by itself will not change the font size or the color, but it will just make whatever is there bold. But if I added other features such as an Arial font, a larger type size, or a red color, the whole thing would be incorporating something called a style. And the sheet, out of the name Cascaded Style Sheets, the sheet is actually the document that always ends in the letters CSS that will accompany the various web pages. And more often than not, this particular styling idea is done in a separate sheet rather than within the document itself, although that's done sometimes. And this allows us to separate the content from the page itself. It looks like I've written this down 2 times, and that's okay. A style basically has 3 attributes, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes: a selector, a property, and a value. And some examples of styles that are done are the background color of the sheet itself, the color of the text, the foreground, the font family, what kind of font it happens to be, the size of it, whether the text is aligned to the left or right. It could have decorations on it. You could define margins, etc. Again, we're taking the style itself and separating it from the physical structure of the page. Does it have tables? Does it have forms, or whatever? And at least at this recording, the Web 140 and Web 210 students will use a button most of the time that's called New Style, and the software will have some kind of dialog box like this one that will take care of all these definitions, and you simply click the choices you want to make, and the style is defined in the background of the document by you're just laying it out. The Web 115 students who are actually learning the language will actually put the code in there, but it doesn't hurt for both groups to have an understanding of what the code is like. And by the way, right over here in this dialog box where it says font family, font size, font weight, these are some examples of the style definitions that I have in this bulleted list here and in the dialog box right in this area. Okay, and I'll talk about the 3 kinds of selectors in a very few minutes. The advantages of having CSS, or cascaded style sheets, is that your layout's better controlled. Again, as I said before, the style and the structure are separated from each other, and you can store the style as a separate document. That way, your pages are smaller and the web pages actually will load faster than they normally would. Site maintenance is much easier because you change the style or the color or whatever in one area and all the pages change at one time instead of having to go to each page individually and make these changes. The disadvantage is that the technology is not completely supported by all versions of the browser. Sorry about that misspelling right there. And we're going to actually look at some examples right here. There are three kinds of styles that are done in Cascading. One is called an inline style, which applies to exactly one set of tags, like a paragraph marker, or if you were doing a hyperlink reference, like clicking on something and it links to another page in your site or to an external page such as Google or Yahoo or CCC's page or something like that. The thing about the inline styles is they're always contained inside the body tags of the document. I'll show you this in a few minutes, and particularly those of you who are not doing actual coding, I'll show you this. Here are two examples of some styles, and I'll actually show you an actual web page in just a minute. Here's a paragraph right here. Instead of just having the paragraph and then just having the name Michael Sisk in there, like say if I took this out, this would be your pure paragraph right here. I just have Michael Sisk inside of it, and there would be a space above and below my name as it's done. Now if I wanted to have a particular style done to this, I might say I want that paragraph, I want Michael Sisk to have a background color of blue and white letters. So what this would do is it would do white letters on a blue background, and that's the way it would look. Another example might be a heading 1 style. I might have something in here where, and I'll actually have a heading in here, and the style might be, and notice this, you can also use the hexadecimal code, which could be the equivalent of blue or red or something, and you can use it this way. The syntax is very strict with the semicolons and quotes, and for those of you typing HTML code the hard style way, hard coding it, it can get a little tricky and a little bit annoying, just very tedious with the code. These are examples, and I want to actually apply this to a document and let you see this. Now for those of you learning Expression Web or Dreamweaver where you're not having to learn the code, this may be highly confusing to you at first, but trust me, it will be worth your time to look at it. Notice that inside the body tags, lines 8 through 11 right here, this is actually the code for this particular document. I'm going to bring over a screen that will actually show you the results of this and try to put these both together at the same time for you. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time while I'm doing this on the fly. Here is the example right here of the document itself, and what I want you to see is the phrase that says this paragraph is using an inline style. It has the green background with white letters, and you'll notice right here in line 9, this one, I've got a style right there that says background color equals, and that's a code for green. The set of 6 F's is for the color white, so this is white letters on a green background. So notice here with the paragraph, I've got a specific style in there, where here you'll notice in this paragraph that there is not a style in between the letter P paragraph markers, so it's using the traditional black letters on a white background. This is an example of what they call inline style, because you've got the actual style inside the actual web page itself. The actual contents of the web page and how the web page is displayed is always between the tags that say body and the / body. So that's an example of inline style right there. What would happen is the page by default would be the black letters and a white background by default, unless you override it by making a definition in here. You don't have to just put background color and color. You could put whether it was a bold font or whether it was a particular family like Arial or Helvetic or some other kind of font definition. So this is an example of inline style. The second kind of style, where the inline style applies to one set of tags where you actually put the style in between the tags, paragraph and paragraph, and again I've got my little typo right here I've got to take care of. Sorry about that. I need to write this in here and get it correct and save it. With an embedded style, it applies not to just one tag but to the whole web page. It's always contained inside the head tags, and I'll show you this in a few minutes. Here's an example right here, and because I'm using it 2 different kinds of books, The standard HTML or the XHTML requires, a file that is called type, or a definition called type equals text CSS. And again, don't worry about a lot of this terminology. You'll have the book to help you out, and certainly I can answer as many questions as necessary as well. HTML5 doesn't need this. You have the definitions for body and for heading 1 in between these little curly braces right here. So I've got background color black with the text probably being lighter right here. The heading 1 right here is saying for all heading 1 tags we're doing this color for the text and this style Arial for the font. And we put these inside a couple of tags that say style right there, and then the one that's the end tag for style. This will seem a bit confusing at first, but again, I'll go through some slow examples with you to show you this application. For example, look at this code right here for, or the page for, something called Trillium Media Design. It's got the name of the title of the page, and it's got 3 hyperlinks. If you click Home, if you click Services and Contact, they go to different pages on the website. And you've got a bulleted list right here. Now again, I'm going to assume that you have done the front end of your book, so you have an understanding of some of this stuff. And again, if you're taking the Dreamweaver or Expression Web class, you may not have as much insight with the code, but it doesn't hurt for you to look at this anyway. I'm going to let you look at the code that's associated with this, and I'll try to set this up so that both of these are showing up on the screen at the same time for you. When I actually look inside the body of the document, there's the heading 1 right there. Trillium Media Design is heading 1. Here are the hyperlinks, the letter A and the hyperlink reference for anchors. Here's heading 2 for new media, which is a little bit smaller. And then we've got the list down here with the little bullets on there. Alright, now I could apply a different style to that. I'm going to do this on a different screen. I'm going to show you something that will change. And I want you to notice how right now it is very traditionally black letters on a white background, but I'm going to click something just to show you a little difference here. If I click this, well, try another one. There we go. Notice what's happened here. Instead of me having the black and white traditional, notice that Trillium Media Design, the heading 1 has a blue background with white letters. Heading 2 has kind of a purplish background with dark blue letters. And you'll notice maybe that the font has actually changed as well. Let me show you how that's happened. If I look at the code associated with this page, all I've done with this, or all the example has done with this, is just make some slight changes. What has happened here is we now have a style definition that's been applied to this document. And what we're saying here is for the body of the document, the background is going to be a certain color, the text is going to be a certain color, the font is going to be Arial, and that's why you saw a change in the font overall. For the heading 1, we've got a background color of blue and a text color of white. And again, these little codes are hexadecimal codes. Dreamweaver and Expression Web will do this for you. For heading 2, the background color is kind of a purple, and the text color is a dark blue color. Notice that even though, for instance, at Trillium 1 right here for heading 1, even though you don't see the word STYLE in that heading as you did earlier, it understands to go to this definition for that heading, because instead of having to write this down here in line 22, again, you just write it down here, and every time heading 1 is noticed in the web page, it changes to whatever definition it is. Heading 2, even though you don't see the word style right there in line 24, the style for heading 2 by definition is right here. So you basically have the style defined at the front end of the document. Now again, notice where this one is in between the 2 tags that say head. The ones where I had just the individual style for paragraph a few minutes ago were inside the tag called body. So here's head right here starting at line 5 going through line 20. Body, which is actually where the document itself is defined, is from line, in this example, from line 21 to line 38. So that's the difference. This is referred to as an embedded style because you've embedded or you put the style for the document in the whole page. So this is applying, the embedded one is applying to the whole page. The inline is applying to simply the one element. And you can have lots of different embedded styles. I'll show you another change right here. Notice this one. I've got a slightly different font from what I had before. And again, the way that was done is to simply change the definition inside the style. Right there, we just added some more stuff to it. And you can have as many tags, whether it's the heading 1 tag, the heading 2 tag, the paragraph, and you'll also, you can have as many as you like. That little M right there, the EM, that's also something very common in web pages, and I'll show you this in another document in just a moment. The M basically is the default font size. Think about people now who have difficulty reading because they may be older and have eyesight problems. Or maybe like in my case, when I'm waking up with my contact lenses, sometimes I'll sleep in them and they're very blurry when I first wake up, and I want my font on my screen to be larger. An M is the equivalent of 12-point size for those who know that. That's standard text for reading on a screen. If it says 0.90 for the font size, that means you're going 9/10 of what the normal default is. If you had 2M right there, it would be double the size. Notice that by default right here, the unordered list is automatically going to be bold, even though with UL down here, it doesn't say bold, but if you look at the page itself, those are bolder. So you're basically defining this in one particular area of the screen, and that way what would happen if I wanted to change that color to something different and apply it, I only change it in that one spot, or the heading 1, I change it in one spot, and it affects the whole page altogether. Again, this may seem confusing. You actually have to try the exercises in the book and maybe have an in-person lecture to really make sure that this makes sense. But again, this is an example of an embedded style right here. Once again, the inline, don't want to make you dizzy looking at these screens, inline applies to just one tag in the document, always contained inside the body tags. Embedded applies to the entire page and is contained before the body inside the head tags. You have a definition for the style, and you can have as many definitions for the tags, body H1, H2, block quote, unordered list, or whatever as you want to. Finally, we have something, and this is the most common or real powerful part of external style sheets, and that's the, or cascading style sheets, that's called the external style sheets. Instead of having the style inside the one page, you have it in a completely separate document. It's contained in a completely separate document from the web page, and that way you can have a whole website of, say, 10 pages in your website, and instead of having that style definition 10 different times in 10 different web pages, you can put it in one place and just link that page to the style sheet. And you only use something called CSS code here. Here's an example right here of where there's a document called body stuff. It's just a CSS code, and you simply define the definition for the body of the document. Background color is black, color is probably a lighter color. Heading 1 having this color and an Arial font. And then what you do is inside the head tag, you put the name of the document, body stuff, in there, and automatically it will apply it to every web page in the entire website. And again, this may sound very confusing, especially if you're not into computer code, and I probably would have to show you this in person or let you try some exercises. But in summary, the inline style affects only one set of tags. The embedded style applies to a single web page. An external style applies to an entire site or a bunch of web pages. Here's an example of an external style sheet right here. Basically what's happening is we have a definition for everything in the body of the document, all the text, unless it's very specific, things like the headings and paragraphs. It's got the background color, the color of the text, and the font, which is Arial. We've got something I'll talk about in a minute called a class, the word container right there. It's got the little pound symbol in front. The heading 1 is going to have a certain color and a certain font. The heading 2 is going to have a certain color and a certain font. The paragraph is going to be a certain size. Sorry about that. We have something with a period after it, a period in front of it rather, called an ID. Again, definition we'll look at later. Another class tag called footer, and another ID called company name. But again, the bottom line is you got a lot of definitions right here. So there's the document. Now the name of that document is called trillium.css. That's the way I saved it. Now this is where I've applied it to an actual web page that you saw just a minute ago. And if I look at this code for this particular web page, you will notice that the word style is nowhere in there at all. But what has happened is I've linked the Trillium page here in line 8 to this particular web page. So the definitions contained in Trillium for the H1, the H2, and all that are already defined. Notice down here when I'm looking at the heading for Trillium Media Design, you don't see anything about blue color and white background. That's because that heading definition is defined right here. This document is linked to it. If I'm looking for the heading 2 definition, even though you see something very simple there, new media and new design, how in the world did it get the purple background and the blue letters? It got that because of this Trillium CSS sheet that is externally out there but attached to it. There's a heading 2 right there. And this is the way that we take the styles for this particular page and have them in a separate document so we can work with it individually. And that way, if I wanted, and I have these for the other pages as well. Notice how I've gone to the services link, our services meet your business needs, and contact. I've got 3 different pages. Contact's not on this particular one. But if I go back home, see how it changes. I've got the same style as far as colors and font and size, all applying to the same document, and all these pages are linked into this one document. You may not be able to see this example over here, but I'll try to do this. This is where I've got everything in a folder, and if I look at these icons, there is the CSS style sheet right there called Trillium, and these are the 2 web pages, and both these pages are attached or connected with that particular style sheet, and that's the way this information is handled when you're doing web design. This is the trend if you're wanting to go into a lot of serious web design. Anybody can just throw a web page out there, but if you want to be stylistic about it and actually save time and actually have it load faster, you're going to want to understand how CSS works, cascading style sheets, even if you're using a software package versus the code. Now it's a little tricky when you first code it, but with the exercise examples, I think you'll be fine with it. You don't want to get carried away with too many styles. Don't use 20 different fonts on a page. It might look cool for someone, especially a younger person, oftentimes, like an 8th or 9th grader will oftentimes want to do that because they're used to bright colors and pizzazz and all that. But for a business person or someone looking to buy something online or for research, it's not necessarily a good idea to have all that because it will just get too annoying and too distracting. You shouldn't have more than 2 fonts or more than 2 or 3 colors on the page, and be sure the background color and text color complement each other so you read it. For example, a really bright, remember in our PowerPoint days, a bright yellow set of letters on a light blue background might be pretty, but it wouldn't necessarily, in fact, it would not be a sound design in terms of being able to read it. And if you are doing exercises, particularly the HTML classes that are requiring CSS code, look for the keywords. Are they asking for inline styles? Are they asking for embedded? Are they asking for external? You need to understand what these definitions actually mean.